Original thought is still the biggest catalyst for development.
The leaders, people who have great and immense potential.
Them to ask themselves, what is their new role?
We need to nurture these energies into a right direction.
The pedigree of leadership, servant leadership, transformational leadership that we want to see.
We are envisioning forming a think tank where leaders, will continue to be developed, not just for this country, but also for this region and for Africa as a whole.
A lot of the leaders had never had a chance to go and retreat with one another just to think.
Now where these students are, these are all kids now that have graduated from university, who are moving on in different vocations, but who want to keep a link with regard to being together and making a difference.
The leaders, the people who have potential, great and immense potential to transform this country.
They have a valuable experience in the universities or wherever they've been.
And as they are transitioning into society, I think it is important for them to ask themselves, what is their new role?
And therefore, having a facility or a platform that allows them to transition, I think is a fantastic idea.
And we are very confident that this group of young people has the potential to lead Kenya for the rest of this century. And that's why we are investing time and money.
It behooves us to continue to build in these young people the pedigree of leadership, servant leadership, transformational leadership that we want to see in another 5 to 10 years.
We are envisioning forming a think tank for this country where leaders, will continue to be developed, not just for this country, but also for this region and for Africa as a whole.
We need to nurture these energies into a right direction and really bring them to the fore because they're actually future presidents.
So it's looking at the process we have already in AYLF, breaking it down, analyzing it, and evaluating it to see how we can build value for alumni, student leaders.
So to pull them together, bring them into one room from the different universities of this country is in itself a unique situation.
Just to sit down, hang around each other, form friendship, but above all, think. When people come together as a team and join forces, have a common vision, then nothing can stop them.
The National Prayer Breakfast in Kenya is now 13 years old, but the real power of the breakfast isn't that event. It takes place in small groups. It takes place where people meet together and pray together for each other and challenge each other.
So the small group provides a foundation of people who understand each other, who trust each other more than anything else. So you build that sense of trust. It's only when you've built a sense of trust that I now trust you, that I can talk openly.
Without trust, you can't go anywhere. When you meet each other frequently, when you sharpen each other intellectually, when you get to know the likes and dislikes, but most importantly, know the relative strengths of each member of the group, then you're able, in a very informal way, almost like magic, figure out who does what best. And that together, you're able to achieve a lot more than if you are an individual. And that's why I would like these young people to actually find out that power of small groups and the relationships and the multiplier effect.
Vision 2030 was a very small think tank, 5 people, who then expanded until we got to about 40 people. But the thinking around Vision 2030 had happened in those 5 people meeting with another 30, 40 intellectuals for 5 years. And by bringing in a sufficient number of intelligentsia and intellectuals who agreed with the premise to think together for Kenya. That's why the vision now cannot be challenged.
If we can begin a process of getting our young people to see the importance of thinking, analyzing ideas, critically performing surgeries on those ideas, when you interrogate ideas, you are going to have a leadership that now thinks
And so it is important to constantly think, and not only to think, but in Ungwana we talk about big thinking. And so when people come together, then they are able to think through the problems, the issues, what needs to be done now, what needs to be done tomorrow, against what they have experienced, going forward.
God has given us a spirit of a sound mind and a boldness that if we dare to think about these things, God will give us some answers about how Kenya needs to go in the future.
Because I wanted to underline the importance of thinking. That without united thinking, united purpose, I'll tell you now, and you can take my word for it, you will achieve nothing. Original thought is still the biggest catalyst for development. Original thought. People who sit back and say, how do we address the issues facing us as a nation? And that's where I felt that we needed to take student leaders, people who are used to thinking in the universities, and tell them, guy, this continues for the rest of your life. Yeah? so that they don't stop thinking, they join together and continue in what they knew worked in university.
How can we envision, my own personal life, my own family life, my own corporate life, my own, network life in 20 years, and then say, if this is what I want to see in 20 years, how do I work backwards to make that happen? And my challenge today to the young people, as I was talking, is around the second quarter of your life. This is where you're building. You're building your career, you're building your family, you're building your relationships, and out of all those, you'll be able to look back and say, has it been a successful quarter or not?
How do you shift from power to service? I think the basic things that you must consider when you're having that paradigm shift from power to service are, you must ask the critical questions: who you are and where you're going and where are you. You must be able to articulate for yourself a plan, a life plan. And then you must find within that life plan a leadership agenda and a service agenda.
Does a leader follow everybody else and then do things, or do they do things differently? They do things differently, right? So some people call them mad, isn't it? Mad means making a difference, but it's going forward, 2020, 2025, 2030, we will need a very different breed of leadership. We will need people who are hands-on, able to think on their feet. And I think with that, they need to have the ability to know themselves so that they're at peace with themselves, and of course at peace with the rapid pace of change. And I think they must not get under a tsunami and be crushed by it. They must surf the tsunami.
What's leadership? Somebody said it's influence, and that's exactly what it is.
So there are 4 behaviors that I've observed of world-class leaders. The first of those behaviors is the strength of their networks. The second piece is actually about pushing. They're very, very good at pushing. The third thing is the piece around confidence. So they tend to be supremely confident, which is great, but all of us are human. What's unique about them is the speed with which they're able to bounce back. And then the final one, which I think is the most important of all, is being able to be influenceable. And what I mean by that is that it's not just enough to be able to exert your power in different ways. I think it's extremely important to be able to listen, and so that you are also influenceable. Other people can have an influence on you.
At different stages of the journey, you'll have different travelers. Sometimes you start with many people and you don't finish with all of them. And that's just part of the journey. And so what you've got to stay focused is go till the finish. And no matter how difficult the intermediate stages are, never ever give up. Keep on going.
So we have been so much inspired and challenged to have an action point, and I feel like I'm part of a group that can make impact to our generation.
Being challenged to be a think tank for my country, because the old people have played their part, and this is our time to think for the future.
As a leader, lead, develop that teamwork attitude, get the right team on board, think on what you guys can do moving forward.
We have a responsibility to, to shape our nation now going forward, and that responsibility rests with us.
If at all every young person thinks before putting anything into action, we'd be a better group of people.
To brainstorm, to come up with the ideas that can be able to transform this country and take this country forward.
Basically being challenged to think, challenged to come up with solutions for the issues of our times.
I still need to stand out and speak out, because I have learned and I've been refreshed that without a title, I should still be able to offer service to the community and not to wield power from the people.
I would love to see that in the next parliament and the following parliament especially, that we could count more than 50% of people who are in leadership positions, both as technocrats or as politicians or in the private sector, as being from the AYLF pedigree.
I see a nation being run by these people, and these will be people who can hold each other accountable.
My hope is that there would be an incremental growth of these leaders. I would hope that they would take up leadership in the national at the national level, but that they would continue their passion for issues of justice and righteousness and good living.
They will make amazing leadership, not only in Kenya, not only in Africa, but in any sphere that they go into.
Given who God intended them to be, for them to ask themselves, who am I? For them to find their purpose and fulfill it, so that in fulfilling that purpose that is theirs today, then they are able to create a platform for the future generation, which then comes and builds on what they have built.
My generation has done Vision 2030, and Vision 2030 is now being executed. After Vision 2030, what? Because Vision 2030 is a middle-income country. It's not a first world, it's a second world. After Vision 2030, what? Can we make that the purpose of our generation? That we will answer that question and we will execute that answer.
1 year down the line, I want to see better friendships. I want to see people are being accountable to each other. I want to see people willing to create time and work with each other and support each other.
I want to hear a few scars. I want to hear how they're fared.
So 1 year from now, I'd like to see us come together and take stock of those things we said we would do that we have actually done.
1 year from now, I would want them to have very clear KPIs on what it is that they're going to be focused in on.
1 year from now, given the type of engagements that we'll have had then some shifts, some positive shifts, what I may call ungwana shifts.
In the next 1 year, they need to be formed into a very solid group with different forums, and they're able to bond together much more closer, bond together so that they actually can work together.
There would be several small groups that would be muscular by that time in order to lay the groundwork for picking up additional former student leaders.
1 year from now, I'm hoping that we will have a system of trainings.
And therefore my challenge to them in a year's time, I want a scorecard. What is it that you have done? How much time have you given in service to your community in this direction? And what impact have you received?
That they'll still be thinking. That's what I want. That they'll still be meeting and they'll still be thinking.
And I would want to urge them collectively to ensure that they go down in history, not as a generation which only knew what needed to be done, because many of us know what needed to be done, but one which had the courage, the commitment, and the conviction to see it done, and saw it done. I think that's what I would like to see.
When Jesus healed a blind man, yes, and the blind man could suddenly see, yes, and he was speaking to the Pharisees, and he just said, you know what, guys, I was blind,